Welcome to knitting with double pointed needles, which you need to use if you're making something circular like a hat, a sock, or mittens. We're just testing, you're just experimenting, so I want you to pick a fabric, get some needles, and I just did 30 stitches on the needle. That divides into 3 needles, quite lovely. Doesn't have to be exact number on each needle, but I did 30. What I want you to do is to cast on your 30, and then I want you to transfer the stitches fairly equally onto the other 2 needles, so you have 3 needles with stitches on it. And the way you do that is you just take a needle and you are just slipping the stitches over like that. There's 1, 2, 3, etc. So I want you to go ahead and transfer so you have an equal number of stitches on, or fairly equal number of stitches on each needle. In this case you'll have 10, 10, and 10. I have my stitches on each needle. When I'm not working with my needles, I push the yarn so that it is in the center of each needle. In case it slips off, it helps prevent that. Okay, now that you have to join them in a circle, you take your needles, you make sure that your cast on edge stays down, you don't twist it, make sure it doesn't get twisted, and you need to now hook the last stitch that you now knit or cast on, you have to switch these 2 stitches. That's your first one and that's your last one. So I'm just going to slide the needle up, and I'm going to slide the needle up, and I'm going to make sure that my working yarn is going to be in the middle and up on the top. So there, it's coming up on the top. I grab the other, I just grab those 2 and I just make sure they're in the middle and up on top, and then I swap out those first and last stitches. So there's the first stitch now on this needle, and there's the last stitch now on that needle, and there they are. You have now joined your yarn. Easy. You've joined your yarn, you've got a circular pattern, and now you want to knit. So you do whatever your pattern says. You might be doing a ribbing where it's knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, or maybe it's knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, or maybe it's just straight knit. Doesn't matter. You just do whatever the pattern says. But you have to introduce a 4th needle. So I make sure that my work's always in the middle of the needles I'm not working with. This is the one. There's my yarn. I have to knit this way, so this is the needle I'm going to be working on. I always put my working needle to the top of the other 2. I grab my yarn, and in this case I'm just going to knit. So you just knit as per normal. So there is 1, and the first stitch you do on every needle, you have to pull that stitch tight. If you don't, you're going to end up with tremendous gaps in your work. Your sock is going to have these lines down it, or your hat's going to have these lines down it, and you will know where that where the break was between the first needle and the second needle, or the second needle and the third needle. So you want to make sure that you pull that first stitch on every needle quite tight. So I'm just showing you that here. Okay, so there is the first needle done. First needle's done. I'm going to push the work more to the middle of that needle so I don't lose anything. Turn it around. Put the next working needle on the top. That's the way I like to do it. Got my 4th needle that I'm going to knit with. Grab my yarn. Now I have to push this needle down so I can work off the stitches, and in this case I'm just knitting, so I'm going to knit the first stitch. I knit it, pulled it off, and I'm going to pull that stitch tight. Just make that a habit. Pull it tight, and then you won't have a line in your knitting. Okay, so there is coming up on the second needle getting knit. Sorry, just needed to tug some more yarn free. There's the second needle getting knit. Beautiful. like that. Great. Put it into the middle, turn the work a little bit, put your working needle on the top. I find that easier anyway. Grab your fourth needle, knit or purl or do whatever to that stitch that you need to be doing. In my case, I'm just knitting. So I'm going to knit the stitch, pull it off, and what do? Pull it tight. Pull it tight or you're going to regret it. Make that a habit. Pull it tight, the first one, and then after that you're fine. Just knit normal or normally. And we are coming up to the end of what we call a round. They used to be rows when you straighten it, but when you're knitting in the round on circular needles, it's the end of your round. Coming up to the end of my round. I know it's the end of my round because I see my tail there, and it's the third needle. That's the end of my round. If you were marking rounds, you know, sometimes it tells you to do something different in each round. You will need, sorry, just grabbing, you will need a counter to help you keep track of where you are. So I know this is the end of my round because of the tail, but maybe just because of the nature of the project, this is going to be a little confusing. Oh, that's the end of the round. And often what we'll do is we'll use a stitch marker to indicate to us that that is the end of the round. So it would go on at the end of the round, and when you're knitting you would come to this and you go, oh, that's the end. Trouble is, if you just have it on the end, it's going to fall off. So if you like to use a stitch marker, which I actually do, what I do is, okay, I'm going to start on my second round. I'll knit, let's just say one stitch. So I'll knit one stitch. I'm just going to do a little bit of shifting here is what I'm going to do. Why did I knit that so tight? Anyway, okay, so that's the first stitch of the second round, right? But what I want to do is use it as a holder to stop my stitch marker from falling off. I put on the stitch marker like that, and what I'm going to do is take this first stitch of that next round, and it's now going to live on this needle because I want it to hold my marker in place. Voila! Look at that, and I'll just pull that tight. There. So now when I'm knitting, la 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 la, I knit, and then when I come to this needle, I go, oh, there's the end of my round because there's the marker, and there's the first stitch of the next round. And then you would just keep knitting, and that is indicating where the end of your round is. And that is how you knit with double points. I want you to practice that before you attempt your first project. Happy knitting!